Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Punk Perspectives. Today, um, I got a very topical one from one of my favorite street bands of all time, The Unseen. We're going to be doing Weapons of Mass Deception, and
Mhm.
I got no other than Tripp Unseen here, who wrote the song, right?
Repeat guess. I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I want to talk a couple things about this song. One, kind of like back then when you were writing it, what it meant, and
Yep.
then kind of what it means now, because to me, it feels topical again.
Unfortunately, incredibly relevant still. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start right off with like I guess like the first iotas. I mean, it's obviously a play on words of weapons of mass destruction.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess what was your first memories of the creation of this song?
Um, Gosh, I honestly don't really remember. So I think it was probably written around 2003, 2004, probably closer to 2004. Um, so for for those that maybe are a little too young to remember, that was probably 1 or 2 years into the Iraqi invasion, the U.S. invasion of Iraq, which was predicated on this notion that Saddam Hussein was developing weapons of mass destruction. So they were accusing him of creating nuclear weapons, um, which was a proved to be very unfounded. And at the time it wasn't that was very public. The UN were like, we don't believe this to be accurate. Now, Saddam Hussein is a terrible person. So I want to kind of fabricate all this on the ideas of um, not America bad, him good, everybody bad in this particular case. But the idea of what the Bush administration was using to justify regime change over there proved out to not only be false, but very publicly false, and that to me is the bigger issue.
He's the man who 8 years ago supplied America with false evidence that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, has now admitted that he deliberately lied. Rafid Ahmed Alwan al-Jabani, codenamed Curveball, said he had deliberately misled the West, telling them that Iraq had mobile biological weapons trucks because he wanted to bring down Saddam's regime.
No question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. The nuclear armed Saddam will place the security of our entire world at risk. And make no mistake about it, if and once Saddam has nuclear weapons, the terror network will have nuclear weapons.
You don't need to be a historian to know that America has gone under and tried to implement regime change in a lot of different countries throughout the world. Usually, very rarely is it ever on such bold-faced lies. So it was really, to me, not just the idea of these guys are lying about the reason they're doing. They've been caught in the lie and they don't care. That to me was kind of the bigger wow. I'm a cynical person. I never was the kind of guy that, oh my gosh, the government is lying to us. How can you believe that? That's a given. To me, what was shocking at that time was just how little they just really stopped hiding stuff like that. Or at least that's what it felt like to me at the time. In my, it's probably my early to mid 20s back then. So I'm a much younger person. My understanding of the world a little less nuanced than it is now. But yeah, the big headline there, long way to say, America has done things like this before. The idea that they were starting to be so blatant about facts don't matter quite so much if we're going to wage wars of aggression was new and scary. So that was where that came from.
Yeah, and that's like when I heard this song too. I guess one thing that really hit me home with it being one of my favorite songs to it is I was around the age of draft time. Not saying that that would have been a thing, but it's like
Yeah.
anytime there's a war, I don't know how old you are, but there's these chances, and I also had friends that went to war for
Yeah.
this whole, and like you said, basically it was weapons of mass deception is the greatest thing because it's exactly what you said. It's very clear that we're just going to go to war because.
Because yeah, and the need to justify military aggression, the threshold had been so low That is what felt very new to me. And this is also fresh off 9/11 too, which is, I think for younger people a little bit difficult to understand how raw and open that wound was. The idea of that many American deaths on American soil was very new, still very new, thank goodness. But they had carte blanche. Even I, as a very left-leaning person, was less surprised and maybe even angry than I might have been, because we have friends in New York, we know people that died, all this other stuff. That even though there was no connection between Saddam Hussein and the terrorists that carried out that attack, that was the Bush administration. They tied them together very blatantly too. So the justification wasn't that needed, I guess, in a lot of people's minds. The fact that there were no WMDs didn't matter so much, and that was also kind of an understanding of really kind of getting my feet around what a post 9/11 world meant in terms of how your average American saw America's place in the world. And that was also a really unfortunately sobering time, when you start to realize how willing people were, because the nerves were so raw about the attack still. So, it was under that cloud of that, historically, putting it in that context. It doesn't change my take on it, but it definitely colored it, especially at the time.
Yeah, and I got so many questions here. I'll ask a little later. I want to go through, of course, part of the song portion too. So,
Yep.
one question I had in there too. Do you remember when you were writing the lyrics? Was it kind of like just a burst and it came out, or did it take you time to get everything?
I don't remember specifically, but it was probably a burst. Most of my songs were like that. So, and it's a decent song. There's nothing in there that's worth belaboring months and months at a time. So, like most of my songwriting at the time, I sat down to write it. I probably tweaked a word here and there as we went forward, but it was probably a one-time thing. But I truly don't have any recollection of sitting down to write it. It happened.
All right, that's where I think I differ with you a little bit, or maybe just to me, this is one of the most poetic songs.
Oh, thank you.
With the lyrics on it, which I'll do my Dead Poet Society thing here in a minute. I'll read the lyrics back to you, and then I'll ask you more on it.
Sure.
Well, so the first line, it just hits very much. I'll take these off while I read it. We are the bastard children of a nation whose dreams have died. And I'll just stop right there. If you remember, I mean, it's like that a song that it hits. I mean, that's a very epic, profound line right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice. I like the visual imagery. I think the nation, the idea of, being disillusioned at the American dream is not particularly unique or profound. It's a good sentiment. I agree with it. Certainly, by no means am I the first person to say it. So, to me, it's anytime I look back at some of these stuff, I wrote it when I was a much younger man. I was a much angrier man, and you're just kind of figuring those things out. So, but yeah, I mean, bastard children of nations whose dreams have died. We were really kind of getting at for my particular take, that the notion of our role in the world has always been somewhat of global cop, but at least under the facade of doing it for democracy. And this is the first time in my lifetime where it felt like, okay, those gloves are off. Now we are just being conquerors. So that was kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah.
And being, bastard children is being the American. I am still an American. So these are things that are being done, quote unquote, in my name, that you have to kind of wrestle with as well. Obviously, I'm not voting for these people. I'm not making the orders, but it is, as an American, you still have to interpret that a certain way, and you still certainly carry that, especially for us, because we were traveling internationally at the time too. So there was a little bit of that. Yeah, we were, not a lot, but we're a touring punk band. We're going to overseas, and you kind of have to think of yourself as American in that way too. So I'm sure that colored it as well.
Yeah, it's I also where it comes into, it's the track placement. I don't know how you guys came up with that, where it's track 4, so it's other side, scream out, and then it is there, and then boom, that line hits you, and you have this real great drum beat as well.
Yeah.
Before it comes in. Okay, and then I'm going to continue here. So then it goes, everything that we believed in all turned out to be a lie, and change seems so difficult. Acceptance is the common voice. powerless against their power, we act like we don't have a choice.
Right. And, we just kind of already talked about that. It's that idea of, okay, the perception of our global actions are a little bit changed. They're off the table. And
Mhm.
how that, like I said earlier, everyone just went along with it. Part of it was due to the post 9/11 hangover that most of this country felt. And it also, the corridors of power are far away. If you're not a Washington insider, and if you're a person that lives in Kentucky, and this is happening in Iraq, it's such a world away. Um, it also felt very, very disconnected. I'm old enough to remember the first Operation Desert Storm. And again, who knows? I was eighth grade, ninth grade. I don't remember how old I was back in the early 90s. That felt like a bigger deal. That was a much bigger America is going to war. This is scary. This is big. This is bad.
Yeah.
Whereas the Iraqi invasion felt much more like, oh yeah, this is happening. It got a lot of press. My recollection was it felt much more as this it's something that felt inevitable as opposed to the previous first war of my lifetime, where that felt like a much bigger deal and there was more debate about its merits, whereas this was just kind of given. So I think there a lot of that colored some of my thinking as well.
Yeah, yeah. And again, just like going back in that time, and I want to talk about how it's relevant now, even today.
Yeah.
But a
Gross.
lot of those same exact feelings, especially how I felt too. It's like, where in a way it's kind of a bum out song to me because you have that line there, like we act like we don't have a choice, and that was kind of like we kind of felt powerless to this, like no matter what kind of protest, what stuff we were doing at the time, it wasn't changing.
Right.
Like, yeah, you
Which is
just
very
yeah.
true today, like Democrat, Republican, they're all doing this. I have no indication that if Trump was in the White House, that there wouldn't, something under a Harris or a Biden regime wouldn't have done some kind of regime change somewhere too. So
Yeah.
there is the inevitability of this field. This is part of the American war machine. It has been, again, it has been forever. For me, the shocking part was like, we're not even pretending that this is not happening anymore.
Yeah.
Just the blatantness of it.
Mhm.
Is wild. And I still feel that way. I
Yeah.
I will hold my nose and vote Democrat just because I'm just old and I'm stuck in my ways. But I have no disillusion that doing so is this high moral choice versus voting for Trump. I mean, it is the American war machine will keep marching regardless of who's in charge of it, and that has been proven time and time again, unfortunately. So that act like we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
That lyric sounds a little accusatory, almost like, no, we can get together and stop this. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if I actually believe that, but that's the more the notion of the song. It's supposed to be a protest song, so you got to give
Yeah.
a little bit of hope.
Yeah, there's that. That's why I like there's on the other album, Eternal Salvation, there's Let It Go, which I think you may have
Hmm.
written as well, which that's a very much more like we can make a change, I guess, versus
Yeah,
how I felt in this time too. And also I think like you said, this was the State of Discontent came out in 2005. So Trump Bush just after everything that went on with the Iraq war and all this stuff, he won again overwhelmingly his second term.
yeah,
Right around this time, which is there's like
yeah,
again, like, I didn't the faith in my fellow Americans was very like confused. Um,
yeah.
all right, now here's the great part. So then we go to the chorus, right? Weapons of mass deception. Fear is the greatest weapon, used to maintain their control because the scared do what they're told.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty straightforward, concise way to say it. And again, I think that's um unfortunately not unique to that time period. We're seeing it now. I think you saw it 100 years before that. I think that
Mhm.
is a fundamental power dynamic that those in control have always used. You can rule through force, and that will only get you so far because that only gives you as far as your bullets or truncheon or whatever it is you're maintaining power with can go. Fear is omnipresent. Fear spreads. That idea of weaponizing fear. I mean, that's what fucking Dracula did, right? That was Vlad the Impaler's like
Mhm.
happened to know a little bit about the Ottoman Empire, and he had way less people, so he was gruesome with everyone he killed in order to make people scared of him. So, it is unfortunately a very, very human reality that I do not think will go anywhere. So, this was written about the particular the Bush administration, but you could apply it to the current one, to anything previous, all the way back to, I'm sure, caveman times.
Yeah. Yeah, and that those lyrics hit me at home with again the time where this came out was just post 9/11, we're going to Iraq, and you did see America was so scared of like another terror attack to where Patriot Act got pushed in and you saw us
Yep.
just losing tons and tons of like freedoms and rights.
People willingly gave up rights around that time, largely based on fear. And that was a master stroke of those that were interested in doing it.
Yeah. And I don't think we've gotten them back either.
No, 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 no. Obama did, he kept that train running, and he was a much, in my opinion, a more moral and better human being. But yeah, like the way he stripped back some of those rights under the Patriot Act, it's just, again, the war machine keeps moving.
Yeah. All right, jump into the next verse here. So dangers, yeah, right. Dangers lurking at every corner, minds clouded with mistrust, new witches for them to burn, smoke covers
Yeah.
the bloodlust, false fears installed in masses, so real issues go ignored. Then the next line is actually one of my, I think, very poetic lines as well. Maybe some just from Phoenix. It's like a phoenix rising from the ashes, total powers their reward. But I guess you're kind of referring to them as the phoenix there, or
Yeah, it's the God, I don't even remember the exact myth, right? But whatever it is, Greek, I don't remember. But the parable is, there's a bird, it catches on fire, you think it's dead, it comes back stronger, was my remember, right? So for me, that the metaphor there was the fires of 9/11 is this phoenix. You have all the rubble, and from that rubble comes this power seize moment. So, if it's written more from the perspective of those in power, but this notion of, you have this terrible smoking crater over there at ground zero, and from that smoke rises this opportunity to start regime change, to take away the rights of Americans. So that idea of, taking tragedy, taking something that is beaten and battered, and coming back stronger. In this case, what's coming back stronger is this American imperialism, and as it relates even to its own citizens, is the phoenix in that. Not a happy phoenix.
not a happy phoenix. But I'm
Mhm.
happy I do this too. I would have never put together
Mm.
ground zero being like the ashes. Okay.
Yeah, ground zero is the moment where that all comes back, and
Yeah.
because we have this collective trauma, they took to their advantage to push their agenda.
Man, that's great. And then I like up there too, like the line before it, where it says, real issues go ignored. Very topical right now.
Epstein files, yeah. And again, it didn't start or end with him, but this is the most blatant version I've ever seen of it. But that notion of, ooh, we don't, this is a PR, we don't like this, let's distract them over here.
Yeah. Now we're going into a war. Do you want to get,
Yeah.
what's going to happen to it? And so, yeah, the real issues at home. So you remember like what issues was going on at home?
That's a
Yeah.
good question. I don't know specifically what I'm referring to there. I'm sure a quick Google would call something up. But I'd love to be able to tell you, oh yeah, this was happening, that was giving, the Bush or the Cheney family a bad look, and they wanted to switch it. I don't remember anything specific. I'm sure there's a million we could pick and choose from, but I don't remember there being anything specific there. So it was either, the understanding that usually these things are timed in such a way that they sweep things under the rug, or at least they're influenced by those in power's desire to shift a narrative. But I don't remember exactly what narrative I thought they were shifting.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now, again, like you said, with what's kind of going on, we'll talk more about that in a second, but yeah, definitely.
A little bit more obvious these days.
Yeah. All right, I'll jump in, and then this is like the final of the well, I have two questions on here. So it has control through fear. The reign of terror is here. Control through fear. The terror's powers made clear.
And that to me is just kind of what we got at, is which, ultimately was what bin Laden was trying to do. The terrorists were looking to weaken America, and in a way they did. So this is my way of saying we are the victims of this terrorist attack and the response of those in power is to take the rights away from America and then to bring America into a war that publicly sinks our standing within the global community, which it did. So that to me is the true power of the terror. Like Bin Laden was successful in that. He was not looking to bring America to his knees. He knew that a single terrorist attack was not going to um, stop us doing what we were doing. But he was very accurate in the way that he knew it would send us spinning. It would go to lead to global conflict that would weaken America's standing on the global stage, which it did. Whether or not he was trying to do that in a way that it also took the rights away from Americans, who knows, but it was successful in that. So that was kind of my way of saying, they won in a certain way. If the terrorist goal was to weaken our standing and have us inflict pain on our own people, that's what happened. So that to me, outside of the 2000, however many people that lost their lives, like that's the real issue there. But the ripple effect of that attack, that to me is where the terrorism was more successful, in that it forced America's hand to act in a certain way that did not bode well for us. Ended up killing far more Americans than Bin Laden was able to do, and have us, weaken the infrastructure of or the American liberties as well. So that was very successful in that regard. So that to me is kind of the terror attack was not just about the blood of those Americans. It was about the aftermath. And that's what I think he was ultimately trying to do, which he was ultimately successful in. So that was kind of my way of processing that stuff.
Man, makes sense too. And I remember when I was hearing this, I don't know if you're like a history buff, but I remember I was, just learning about like the French Revolution, and they have that reign of terror.
Yes, that's a very specific line about that. Yeah.
So it is kind of reference. I was thinking, like, I wonder how
Oh yeah.
historians will look back at America's time. Is that going to be our reign of terror? I was thinking because
It's a little poetic liberty, because the French reign of terror was
was
fucking
way
brutal.
yeah.
they were chopping off heads if you looked at them funny. So
Yeah.
but that notion, it does tie into the same idea that you can whip a population up into a quote unquote mass hysteria,
Mhm.
tell them what's right, and they will look the other way on things they would not normally do. So again, poetic liberty. I'm not trying to make a direct correlation to Americans willing to be wiretapped as opposed to
Yeah.
chopping off 1,000 heads. But
Yeah.
there is a connection there of a populace willing to give up a little bit of itself in the aftermath of a trauma or tragedy. That there is a direct correlation, and it's state fueled violence, which what the French Revolution was doing as well. Just depending on which side of which side of history you're on. I happen to agree with a lot of the philosophies of the French Revolution. In practice, didn't come out so well, but that usually tends to be the way these things go.
Yeah, and I remember at the time too, it's kind of like where I remember the start of, um, like you said, the mass surveillance on our own people, cancel culture. Even I remember the pop group, the Dixie Chicks were
Oh
trying
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
there
that
was
about
that.
it.
Yeah,
And just like cancel, like you had to be. It was very and Islamophobia is when I also remember started like picking up more and more too. Like around
yeah, yeah.
that time, it was
I think that's always been there. It was just the idea of like you didn't have to pretend at that moment.
didn't matter.
Um, yeah, 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 yeah. There was a lot of, again, not the first and not the last, but that there was a lot of big trucks with flags. There was a lot of flag waving.
Oh yeah,
Um, that you could use to cover your eyes or waft away, and the irony of it is always of the idea of using the American flag while handing over your rights is just so funny to me. Like the novelty of that, or the irony of that, is not wasted on me as well. Um, yeah, it was a gross time. It wasn't my favorite.
no, and I forget. There's one last line, and you know what? And I don't know if this is because when I listen to the song, it's hard for me to really hear it. But maybe it's there. It's in the lyrics part. Otherwise, it says the last line says the end is near, but that's also the track title to the song right
No,
before it?
that's
You
yeah,
don't.
that's some weird internet typo, I would assume.
It's a typo.
At least to me, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If
Um,
we did that on purpose, I don't remember why. It was an offshoot
yeah,
decision at the last
it's
second.
on the inlay, but yeah, I saw that and I'm like listening to it. And I'm like, maybe it was just like some sort of like thing. So okay, that was on my
Yeah, it's
that's the
probably a
part.
typo.
It really makes it a bum out song. Like you say all that and then yeah, and the instant. So okay, that part's good.
Yeah,
And so man, I started getting really like again, Unseen's one of my favorite bands, especially during this time. It was very therapeutic, like feeling like yes, there's like you know words that were expressing how I felt.
cool.
Um, and so you kind of said, it, I guess, too. And I guess I just want to just double check on that because there's a couple layers there. Do you remember when you first wrote it? Like what expression? What was the intent of your expression? Was it to like get people to be aware? Was it more of frustration?
Yeah, more frustration. You know, when we wrote, anytime we wrote songs, it was never, we never saw ourselves as needing or wanting to educate people. You know, like I wouldn't shy away from that, but it was never a, this is our duty as the unseen to make people aware of this. I think we're a punk band. You play angry songs. You write about what makes you angry. That was something that was making me angry at the time, so I wrote about it. So it would never, the desire to, I'm glad that you took all of that out of it. That's a happy, not accident, but a side effect of it. It was never, that was never really our intent as much as something I was reading about, something I was angry about. We write angry music. That's how comes together.
Okay, nice, nice. Um, Now I'll ask you this other part of the song too. Whose cruel idea was it to put in the police sirens in the middle of the song? So many times I'll be driving and I'm like, oh shit, is that
Yes.
it's caught me a couple times and always my friends if they're in the car with me. Whose idea was to put that in there?
So that middle part's actually funny. I do get that. That's funny. That for that, I have that same experience. It was fuck, what? Police on My Back by The Clash also has police sirens in it. And every time when I hear when I was driving, I think it's me. So we always, I will sidebar, then I'll answer your question. We also at the time wanted to put a phone ringing because that was back when people had house phones really loud just to make people get up and go answer their phone every time. We were just like, wouldn't that be funny? That was not the intent with that, but that idea of planting subtle life cues within a song, I do think is humorous. So the middle of that song always just had that kind of that break, which doesn't really go anywhere. We didn't write any new music to it. It was just like a pause because the song is kind of relentless and we wanted to do something in the middle. Um, I do remember this. I was thinking about this the other day. In the studio, when we were remixing it, we did some mixing here, and then we ended up going out and doing some remixing with Brett Gurewitz of Bad Religion, which was a very big deal to us, especially me and Scott, my guitar player, because we are both very big lifelong Bad Religion fans. So Brett owned Epitaph. Hellcat was a subsidy, blah blah blah, whatever the terms are. We had
Mhm.
met Brett before, but he's not our buddy. He's kind of he's in an orbit way beyond us. Um, and we were doing some stuff with the mixing with the producer we'd always used, and he admitted, he's like, I don't know why I just can't get this to sound the way I wanted to, blah blah blah. Long story short, we talked to Brett. He agreed, and he's like, why don't you come up, I'll get you some studio time. If you guys fly yourself out to California, I'll remix it for you. We're like, fuck, great, so we'll do that. So we go out to California, we're remixing the entire album. It's starting to sound great, we're all feeling good about it, mixing that particular song. And Brett's like, this is boring. Like, what are we doing here? Like nothing. This isn't pushing the song anywhere. It's not a new part. It's the same thing as the verse, and without that, we're like, yeah, you're not wrong. So in that studio, I actually wrote a not spoken word, but I had like a little a little part. I did some, punk bands do it. The music starts muting and the singer talks over it, very pointed and angry and blah blah blah. And it was very spur of the moment. And I remember writing it, and I'm writing it is old days. I'm writing pen and paper, and I'm doing it, and I'm like, okay, I got something. And then I go in and I go into the booth and I record it. And Brett's like, what did you say? And I went and showed him my words. and this is Brett Gurewitz. He wrote some amazing lyrics, and he's a songwriting partner to Greg Gaffin, who wrote some of the smartest lyrics in punk rock. And Brett looks at it and goes, "This is really good." And I was like, "Oh shit! Like that is such a compliment." He goes, "This is really good. I don't want it in the song. You don't need it. It's too much." And I was like, "What are you fucking talking about?" We like listened to it a few times, and he was right. Like it kind of came out of nowhere. I'd already said everything I needed to say in the lyrics. This was a more poignant way to say it. And he's like, "This is well done. You should be proud of these words. This is not adding anything to the song. It's just kind of making things feel a little bit heavier." I was like, "All right." So like, what else are we gonna do? And he's like, and I was like, "Well, what if we put like some sound effects? What if we did some noises from the war?" So then we went and got then we just started playing around with how can we add some stuff. So the goal with there was to take some sonic stuff from the Gulf, or not the Gulf War, that was the first one. But any of the soundbite news clips from the current war in Iraq, and then some news clips from 9/11 to try to tie them together, because that was the deception, right? Of Bush trying to connect those two things that were not connected. Um, how we got those particular sirens, I don't know. That was probably at the end of the day like a sound effect or something like that. But the goal was to try to take audio from both the war and news footage of 9/11 and kind of create this muddled anxiety tension building thing that actually elevated the song, because that's what Brett was like, "This part isn't elevating the song in any way, let's add it." We tried to do it with words, it didn't work, so then we did it with samples and sirens and stuff. So that's how we got there. It was a long way to say it, but it was actually really, and, it was like, like I said, I don't remember what I wrote. I don't have a copy of it. I wrote it on a piece of paper. We didn't use it. I threw it away. It's just one of those things that's gone forever. I'd love to go back and read it. But I do remember Brett saying, "This is good. You should be proud of it, but we're not going to use it." And being like, "Okay." Like, and that's what it's like to work with a good producer.
Yeah.
He was right too. He was right. Like that's the thing about when especially for a band like the Unseen, we've had the same three core members, and ultimately at the end of the day, most of the same members for 30 some odd years now.
Yeah.
It's good to get somebody with an outside perspective saying you could do this the way you've always done it, or you could do something slightly different, so you're not either sinking a song or doing something that the audience is always going to expect, because that gets boring. And it's nice to have those outside perspectives. We don't work with a lot of producers. Ken Casey from the Dropkicks helped us on this. Brett helped us with this a little bit. That was pretty much the most we've ever done with outside people. But looking back, I'm very appreciative to have their insight on that, just because they haven't been in the band since fucking 1993. So they had an outside, a fresh perspective on what we could do that I'm appreciative, and I think it pushed the song better.
It definitely makes it stand out, I think. Yeah. All right. So before I go into like more about today, I will ask a question, kind of a sidebar question too, that I got a lot from actually reading online that seemed to repeat itself.
Oh yeah.
So do you remember that you went on to the Rock Against Bush volume 2 comp?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that it happened. I don't remember anything very specific about it. But
okay, because that's gonna be the question. Like, do you know like how those those comps would come? Because it was like Fat Records, I think, that did it.
Well, well, at the time we were in talks with Mike about signing to Fat. So we were, we didn't, our circles did not cross with the NoFXs of the world, but they were one level adjacent. So I didn't know Mike, but maybe I knew someone that worked. I don't quite remember exactly. But he was interested in signing us. I was never I've never been a huge NoFX fan, but I do like Mike. I think he's a really provocative, smart guy. So I'm assuming it came out of those talks. I'm assuming that's how we were on the radar over there. And we were, we were glad to do it. A, it's exposure. B, fuck Bush. So that
Yeah,
it wasn't like it wasn't a should we or should we not do this. It was, of course we will do this. But yeah,
yeah.
that was we were doing a little bit of label shopping back then because we were more of a hot commodity than we are now, so we could afford to do that kind of shit.
Which makes sense. You're on Hellcat. That went to Hellcat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. That I,
Um,
and who knows what, and that was great. Like, we're from the East Coast. We were not in that sphere of these professional punks. Yeah, and they were still punk labels, but they were professional labels. They had LCCs, they had
yeah.
lobbies with receptionists. Like, all that shit was so fucking weird to it. Still is. But they were all cool to us. So, we flew out to California and kind of bounced around and let everyone buy us dinner and then decide who would give us the best and at the end of the day, everyone was really cool. Like, no one was getting rich off us. No one was
Mm.
trying to sell us the world. We were a safe bet. Like, you guys are good. You tour a lot. You're
Yeah.
willing to, you put out good records. Probably you'll give our label a little bit of street punk credibility, and we won't lose money on you. So let's do it. And that was kind of their attitude. That was kind of our attitude as well. So it was all fine.
That's cool. Because I know we got Tim and Lars. They do a couple lines, I think, on one of the songs towards the end. Armageddon, maybe, or I forget.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Tim, I don't think does. Maybe he does. I don't remember. Lars sings a line on one of it too. And yeah, we'd done some Rancid tours at that point. Um,
Mhm.
Overseas, they were always
Yeah.
cool with us too. So
Oh, and so the question though, just sidetracked on
uh,
that, was because putting on this huge Rock Against Bush and with such movement at
mm,
the time and such, a lot of people say why was Scream Out the sampler, not Weapons of Mass Deceptions, which seems like it would be more fitting for an anti-Bush type of
I
song.
don't remember. I mean, honestly, it probably wasn't even
Yeah.
written yet. I feel like that came out
Okay.
before. Scream Out was written like relatively early in that songwriting process, and I feel like Weapons of Mass Deception wasn't. Um, so it's probably a logistic question. If I wanted to get,
Mm.
if you wanted to make it a business question, I think Scream Out is probably the stronger song in terms of broadening our appeal, and that was a chance. We're on a comp with, I don't even remember who was on it, but like some 40, and there were like big bands on it. You know what I
Offspring,
mean?
Green
So that
Day.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I'd love to believe that if those songs were ready, somebody with more business sense than us was like, no, put your fucking catchiest song on there that's going to
Mm.
help you sell records. Um, but knowing us, it was probably just a timing thing. That was probably the only one we had finished that we were like, all right, cool. This is strong enough where we can record this and get it out. Cause I think the version on that comp is an earlier version. I think that's a demo version. I don't think that was before the studio version was done. If memory serves
Yeah,
correct.
it is. So it's Left That World Behind comp. That's the one
Oh, okay.
that's on it. So yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
So we
And
just demoed a couple
so
songs.
makes total sense then to why. And
Mhm.
that was just a question I pulled from seeing a lot of internet, like, why not that song? This would have made more
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, yeah,
My gut says it's because it just wasn't written yet.
yeah. All right. All right, thank you for that one. And so the next though, so now like I'm listening to Unseen, you know, all this like last month, all the time you guys' songs come into my playlist. This song feels like it could have been written today from what's
Mhm.
going on. And in some ways, almost more. I mean, just a few months ago, I was told that they obliterated Iran's nuclear program. And now
Yeah.
it's
Oh, we're
like,
doing it again.
Key
Yeah.
nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
That's right. I remember Trump saying, we totally obliterated their nuclear program, and yelling at people who questioned it, which makes me wonder, how obliterated was it?
It was obliterated like nobody's ever seen before.
again, with everything's been going on, like I said, we were just told that they had their nuclear program was
Yeah.
obliterated. That's why we dropped bombs, and now here we are again, going to war. Seems that way. They're calling it. Not, I don't know what's going on there, but if I feel like, do you feel like this song's almost more important now? And then also the other question: do you think we're actually in a better situation now or worse than what it
Huh.
felt like in the Bush years? Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously the parallels are very obvious, so not to dismiss any of that. I mean, the most glaring difference to me, especially in relation to the words themselves, is um, the original one was predicated on an idea about an WMD program, whereas this current one, like Iraq had a WMD program. So like it's still American aggression, but it's less so about um a fabrication and more so about we've known they've been doing this for a while. For whatever reason, now is the time we're choosing to do it. So um, it is a slightly different scenario in that regard. However, the notion of propaganda and picking and choosing which atrocities are the ones we are going to stand up and fight versus which the ones we're going to let it go remains the same. So that is the reality and disappointing. Um, Especially as it relates to this, like the Epstein files is a very easy scapegoat. It very well could be that. Um, the the rise of Israel's influence over our government is always been there. It's much stronger now. That's a little bit of a quagmire I won't get too much into. So um, there's a lot happening that
Yeah, Iraq and Iran to now, and I guess it's like it feels like the deception almost feels more blatant now. Like, so do you think that we've gotten like it's almost we're in a worse spot than we were back then? Because and this is the weird thing when you hear these lyrics and such, like it felt like this was the reign of terror, and I look back at the Bush years and I'm almost like it's like nothing to what it feels like right
Mhm.
now. And I don't know, maybe I'm off. How do you feel about that when you hear these like lyrics and such and seeing where we're at?
um so yeah, the parallels between the two wars is very clear. The the notion of deception being a central part to that lyric is a little different now because um in the case of Iraq, it was fabricated rumors and stories that were not quite so well established, or it's and now sorry, I'm confusing my countries. But back then it was a little bit more fabricated. We happen to know, what Iraq has with WMDs is very real, not a justification for the war they're waging, but there's a little less propaganda now than there was then. Um, However, you bring in things like the Epstein files and Israel's influence on our government right now. The lines are still very blurred in terms of picking and choosing which atrocities we decide is a justification to go to war. That's a very American thing. How we pick and choose those things is arbitrary, and in this particular, that's where the deception comes in. So in that way, they're very much the same. Um, Better or worse, ugh, I don't know. In some regards, the Bush administration adhered more to global social norms around these things, which I guess is good, but it didn't protect anyone's lives. Trump is way more of a fucking wild card and publicly more willing to be a public asshole, which is worse, but not necessarily has a different effect. Um, I don't know. I go back either day. Every day, it was better here. It's actually was worse then. I think the real headline is these things have always happened. They will continue to happen. Um, the degree of which the spotlight is shown upon the lie versus the truth will fade. But I think to me the unfortunate part is the parallel is this is kind of what we've always done. It's very much our involvement in Vietnam. Like it's a pretty obvious and repeatable pattern that I do think will continue to keep going.
Yeah. There's the line where it's powerless against their power. And
Mhm.
when I was re-listening to the song, it was like right after Minnesota protesters were getting,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
I'm like, I can't remember Like if that was like that's ever been a
That's a very good point. I don't remember, but my gut is the reaction this time is stronger. I mean, granted, that's about stuff that's happening in ICE, which is a domestic issue as opposed to an international issue. So it is a little bit apples and oranges. But I do feel, to your point, I do feel like social and civil unrest and unwillingness to accept that power does feel a little bit stronger now. I don't know if that's because people are just sick of it and they can't take anymore. The cynic in me thinks it has to do with before and after the internet. If you think about protests prior to social media, it is much harder to get organized. It is much harder to plan these things.
Yeah.
It's much harder to share information. It's much harder to radicalize people, good and bad. So I don't know if the situation has just gotten worse and that's why Americans are pushing back more, or if the constant flood of information and selective information that were provided by the internet and our phones, which is what's different between now and then, is a little bit more of a catalyst. That's probably what's happening, but I'm not a sociologist or historian. So we'll see. 20 years from now, we'll look back and be like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's wrapping up. And then the deception part, those even like when you talk about the Epstein thing too, maybe because it is internet and social media, it's more in your face where
It's everywhere. Yeah, it's
he ran
information
on
is
releasing the
everywhere.
Epstein files, and then they said
Oh
he's
yeah,
done. Like
we're
it's
not
just
gonna do it. Yeah.
yeah. Let me check my questions here. Um, yeah, I think that was pretty much yeah, I think I asked almost everything I want on this song. So I guess I'll ask you, do you know anything else about this song? Any because you did both everything on it, right? You did most of the music and you did the lyrics.
Yeah, I wrote all the lyrics. I wrote the main riff, and then I do believe that the chorus was written by Rufio, who was he's a old time Boston punk fixture. He was a touring member of the band, maybe an official. I don't quite remember what his status was. Like he was one of the first. We had a series of guitar players that came in and out of our lives for a number of years after Paul left, and Rufio was a close friend of the band, and he toured with the band a lot, and he was touring with us when we were writing this record, and it was a weird thing. We'd never written with somebody that wasn't me, Scott, Mark, or Paul before. So his involvement in that, I think, was a little fractured. Looking back, we probably didn't handle it the right way. We probably weren't as transparent with everyone as we wanted to. But he contributed music to that album in kind of bits and spurts. I think there's one song he wrote all the music for. He definitely contributed the chorus to that song and maybe some other songs. So it is like kind of a weird gray area of one of the first times someone that wasn't Scott or myself or Paul writing music. But I think on that record we had Ian Galloway, who was another rhythm guitar player that we had for a little bit, wrote a song too. So we were trying to figure out what it meant to be a band that had kind of a little bit of a open door policy at the rhythm guitar part. And yeah, he helped write that chorus. The chorus is great. I'm sure I had something before that was boring. It's actually my favorite part of the song, so I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah, this first album with no Paul, I think.
This was the first one without Paul, yeah, and Paul really wasn't much of the part of the writing process on the album before. Just things that were happening in his life personally. The reason that he left the band was he wasn't really around. So me, Scott, and Mark really wrote the album before almost entirely.
Yeah.
Paul leaves, and then we start the writing process on the second one. And at that point, we'd done a few tours and we'd gotten these rhythm guitar players. So we had these guys that were helping us out that were great on the road. And, when you're on the road in a punk band, you play guitar. So you're writing riffs backstage, you're doing it in the truck. And, oh, that's pretty cool. What's that? I don't know. I'm just fucking around with it. Oh, we'll save that. So that was kind of how we started when we're writing the record. But unlike previous years when everybody's riff just went into the collective pot that was the Unseen's music catalog, we suddenly had guys that weren't part of the band necessarily, that weren't going to be with us forever. And then we had to kind of figure out when do we use other people's stuff? What does that mean? How do we give them credit for it? Which, wasn't a hard deal, but it was the first time for us doing that. Because
Yeah.
usually it was just me, Scott, or Paul wrote everything, and then Mark did lyrics, and we went from there. So
Yeah. And was this the first album then where you were like getting, like you said, people labels were trying to get you, or?
oh yeah. And like we were the prettiest girl at the prom for like 13 seconds. Like it was a fun thing, but it was a very small window.
Yeah.
BYO was great to us. Loved working with them. They were the ones that suggested it. They're like, we think you could do a little bit bigger than what we can offer.
Oh,
You should go try to find a bigger label. Oh yeah, the Stern Brothers are awesome. They're punk rock through and through. So
yeah.
that was kind of like, oh shit, okay. And
Yeah.
then we start. I don't remember how it happened, but we talked to a couple of different labels. But there were only like 3 or 4 that were doing it at the time. Like that was, there was all that spill up from the Warped Tour. There was money to be had, which was great. We didn't get much of it, but we got to hobnob with other people that were making money, and it was fun. It was fun.
So when you wrote, after you had finished this song, like last time I talked to you about the song Victims from Explode, and you were
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that's a song. Like that was kind of like your feeling on it. How does this one feel? Do you remember like when you wrote the song, did it?
I like this one more. It's funny, Victims, we're talking so much about religion. Victims had such a bad religion vibe to it. That was like our goal when we wrote it. So it's funny, full circle there. I definitely like this one more. I think that opening riff is really cool. Like that's just a great punk riff. So I'm more proud of that than I am of the Victims riff, which is still fine. Lyrically, I think this one is definitely sharper. It is one of those things, and I don't want to dismiss it because I love the fact that you appreciate it so much. I think the topic, while important, is not all that unique. So I this idea of, at the time when it came out, it was very important because it was all in the headlines. Listening to it 25 years later, I can say, it was like, yeah, this is the way it's always been. So, and the fact that it keeps coming up and becoming relevant again speaks to its ubiquitousness. So it's like, it's not a particularly strong or sharp point of view that no one else has had before. But for when it came out, it was incredibly relevant. It's a tough riff. We still play it live. People still seem to like it. So I like that aspect of it.
It's sadly still relevant, but yeah.
And sadly it's still relevant. Yeah, I'd love nothing more than to write one of these songs where I was like, oh, that's dumb. But I think about, a lot of those songs I wrote when I was young, So This Is Freedom is one of those songs that I listen to, and I'm like, oh, this is an 18-year-old's understanding of how capitalism works. And it's not wrong. It's baby steps, as somebody that goes on to read a lot more. So it's kind of a fun time capsule in that regard to see stating some obvious things, using some borderline clever wordplay, putting it to a decent riff. Like that's good punk rock. It stands the test of time, not because it's, I think, particularly poignant, but because it's like, this does the job. It's introducing a topic. It's making it feel relevant and aggressive. And hopefully people take from it and they not learn, but they listen to it. They opens their eyes to stuff if they weren't already aware from it, or just validates their own thinking. That shit I love.
Yeah. Freaking, yeah, you're very poetic, man, with your lyrics. What's the probability you think of any future Unseen albums?
We're working on stuff, man. We never broke up. We all live in different states. We don't see each other that often. Well, not all of us. Mark and I live 10 minutes away from each other, but everyone else is spread very far apart.
Yeah.
We have new stuff. We have songs that are written. Most of them are almost done. They need some tweaking. But we move at a snail's pace. We're 50-year-old men. Things take forever to get done. So definitely a possibility. What that looks like when, I don't know, but sooner rather than later. We're all in agreement that we want to do something these are good songs. They're relevant to today's market, and we're not getting any younger. So we want to get them out as soon as we can. But like I said, like that's at our age, it takes a little bit. But yeah, there's stuff in the works.
All right.
We
All right.
yeah, we do a couple of shows a year. We got a show coming up in 2 days from now. We're playing in Boston, and or a week from now we're playing in Boston, and then we were in Germany this summer. So we keep busy for a 30-year-old band. It's usually 4 or 5 shows a year. It's kind of our limit.
What's
But
touring like now? Like you said, you're not, 20 some years old anymore to where
touring is non-existent. We went to Germany for 5 days this summer, and that was the longest tour we've done in 15 years. It's boring, man. It's like
are you able to do
Mark.
it better now at least? Like, do you guys get rooms or is it still like
Yeah. We still share beds. We're not doing that well, but it's only 2 guys to a bed, which is a step up from where we were back in the day. And it's different because of cell phones. I sound very old saying that, but most of my touring life existed before a cell phone. So we all get in the van and everyone gets on their phone, which is great for keeping you from being bored, but it kind of, like it's a different vibe. Which bands that tour now, like they don't have to interact with each other the way we did. And I don't think that's a good thing. That sounds like an old person thing to say. But we made up silly games together. We fought. Like I feel like any human relationship, the cell phone has fucked us in that way. And I think for bands very specifically, because touring was so much about living and breathing with the same 4 dudes and how that impacted and influenced your music and your worldview.
Yeah.
It broke up more bands than it made good. But for the bands that it made good, I consider us to be one of those. That was a powerful thing. And I don't think that happens as much as anymore. I think you get 6 dudes in a van and everyone's looking at their phone, and then you show up at the gig and you're like, oh, we're here. And that's a different vibe.
Well, and because as a fan, it kind of, and I feel old saying this too, and I'm curious to hear your perspective as an artist doing it. When I go to a show, like I just saw Strung Out not too long ago, so many people in the audience now is just filming the show.
What do they fucking do with that? Who's going to watch that again? It's so weird.
So as an artist, does that throw you? Because don't you feed off the energy a little bit to where it's more like they're hot? I don't know.
No, from the stage, I don't give a shit. I don't notice that stuff. As a person, when I'm at a show and someone's doing it, I'm like, what are you going to do with that? Like, I'm assuming they don't watch it later. I'm assuming it's just to put it on social media and say I was here. But even then, like, it's a 2-second clip. Like, what are you holding for the whole fucking? I find it very bizarre. As an artist, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I'll tell you this, as a guy that's also gotten lost in fucking Italy before cell phones, it's way easier to travel with it. I wouldn't trade the convenience for all the band camaraderie in the world. I'm not that much of a Luddite. I'll take the convenience. So like it's one of those things where there's a lot of parts I don't like about cell phone culture, especially as it relates to punk rock, but I'm part of the problem. It's not like I don't have one. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I'm not going to stand at a show and film like an asshole, block the person behind me. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm part of it too. So I think part of a long human tradition of trading integrity for convenience, which we've always done. And I think this is just like the most physical representation of that, the embodiment of that kind of idea.
Yeah. It's again, I think it's something 100%. I wouldn't give it up for the world, but I do, and I shouldn't judge it, but I do think like just enjoy the fucking show. Why like just be in the now. You're not. Maybe they are still enjoying it, watching it, but I feel like you lose a little bit of it. But
that's what weirds me out. I truly don't know what they do with that thing. You know what I mean? Like when I'm looking at my phone and I know I could be interacting with my bandmates, that's on me. And I know there's kind of a nebulous gray area of by doing this, I'm missing out on that, which doesn't exist. Filming a fucking show where I'm like, that is just producing a 30-second 001001 video. Yeah. What are you doing with that later? If you're not actively consuming that after the fact, you're just wasting time and getting in people's way. That like very obvious things like that I'll never get. But not for me. I'm a little bit older. It's not
Yeah.
Who
I mean,
cares?
there's cool parts, I guess. Sometimes I'll go on YouTube and I'll find probably from someone's phone a live song
Hmm.
you guys did or something. I'm like, oh, this, and then I guess there's that. Maybe that's
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
it.
that's true. Like I don't, but like, yeah, like if
Mhm.
we're playing a show in Las Vegas and dudes can't afford to go to Las Vegas to see us, but they want to see us and they watch us on YouTube, fucking great. Like I have no problem with that. So you're right. So I've already talked myself out of it. Like that's good. I'm never going to do that because I'm not going to bother to load something on YouTube because I just don't care enough. But yeah, you're right. I don't particularly watch clips like that, but I guess there are certain things that I've seen, uh, entertainment based, via people's cell phones that I appreciate just knowing it happens. So yeah, I guess there's probably a reason for all of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, great fucking song. Weapons of Mass Deception. Like I said, probably one of my, and it's hard for me. I always say every song from the Unseen, I guess, is my favorite song from the Unseen. So I've just
That's
always
great.
been, but this one is particular, and so much more lately. I was really able to,
Mm,
unfortunately, nostalgically, it's like it's coming right back, and
yep.
I played it
It's
for
too
my
bad.
son. I played it for my son already, and he's like, "Is this about what's going on?" I'm like, this is years
Oh,
before
I
that
wish.
happened. Yeah, so yeah, thank you for putting that out. And I'll stop this.
Great.